Hello and welcome back to the Tower of London, and welcome to the Chapel Royal of St Peter ad Vincula, or welcome into the chapel wherever you're listening to this thought for the day today. Today, the 2nd of February, is Candlemas Day, and it's a really important day in the Church's calendar. It's sometimes simply called the presentation of Christ in the temple, but for certain clergy like myself and others, it's always referred to as Candlemas. And it's about Candlemas that I want to say a few words to you today. So what does Candlemas mean? Well, 40 days after the birth of a Jewish child, it was always traditional to take the child to the temple, and to present the child there to one of the priests. And as we read in Luke chapter 2, I think it's from verse 25 onwards, this is exactly what Mary and Joseph did 40 days after the birth of Christ. When they got there, they were met by the priest, Simeon. And Simeon took the babe in his arms as the child was presented to him for a blessing to be given, as under the law of Moses, each child is presented to God. Each firstborn child is presented to God. Took him in his arms, and then raising his voice, he looked up to heaven and said those wonderful words of what we call the Nunc Dimittis, the prayer or the canticle that's often sung in evensong. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before all men. And this is the key words: to be a light to lighten the Gentiles. To be a light to lighten the Gentiles. And it's this idea of light that gets embodied within the theme of Candlemas. And I've taken the opportunity, as I'm recording this, to light all our candles you can see behind me, not just because it's jolly cold here in the chapel, I can tell you. So, 40 days after the birth of a child, brought to the temple, in this case presented to Simeon, who raises those great words of salutation and praise to God for recognizing the Messiah and recognizing him as being the light of the world. The second reason, of course, always for women, very important to go to the temple 40 days afterwards, because they were considered to be impure, because in giving birth to a child they may bleed, and that was considered to be impure. And this service, this little recognition 40 days after the birth of a child and presentation in the temple, would include also some gesture or gift given to the temple, depending on how wealthy you are. And we read in Luke's Gospel, chapter 2 again, how Mary and Joseph presented 2 turtle doves. That's all they can afford, because they were extremely poor. And since then, the church has embraced this particular festival, this time when Jesus was presented in the temple. And what we do in the church today is often on this day there is a service called Candle Mass, as in midnight mass. There is a mass is another word for Holy Communion or Eucharist or something like that. And in the context of that particular service, all the candles are brought to church to be blessed by the priest for the coming year. And then during the service, the congregation will process round the church or chapel, singing those words of Simeon, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. And at various points in the singing of that canticle, they'll stop and they'll raise their candle and they'll say, to be a light to lighten the Gentiles. Actually, we've done that here in the chapel a few years ago when a group of people came for the service at Candlemas. Now, Candlemas also marks the end traditionally of Christmas. And there are lots of churches which will have kept up their Christmas tree and their crib set right up until today. And today officially becomes the day when Christmas ends. I know that the church St Peter's Wapping, just down the road from here, when I walked past the other day, they still have their Christmas tree and they have their crib set. And all those will be dismantled on this day, 40 days after the birth of Christ, marking the end of Christmas, the recognition by Simeon of this little boy who was going to be the light to lighten the Gentiles, and to remind all of us that we are meant to be like a light in the world. I often say, it doesn't take very much light at all to make such a very great difference, just as it doesn't take very much love in the world to make just a little bit of difference. There are lots of people in the world today for whom the light is very dim and very dark, and we pray for them and hold them in our thoughts and prayers as that we pray the light and love of God may shine upon them.